clauses 1 to 6, the 5, sorry.
Clauses 1 to 5 stand part of the bill. Senator Dinray? The question is that clauses 1 to 5 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 1 to 5 now stand part of the bill.
Clause 6.
The question is that clause 6 stand part of the bill. Senator Dinray, there's an amendment circulated on your behalf. Can you speak to it, please?
Sure. Thank you, Madam President. Should I speak to the entire amendment on both parts or by each part?
No, you can deal with both.
Okay. All right. So with respect to the functions under the board, I think under subsection A, we should include the collection of which is the responsibility of the Director General as the first function of the authority. My main objective of including that is really primarily to reinforce the difference between the role of the board and the Director General. But I know the Attorney General started to give me an explanation about it off the record. So, and with respect to the other parts, I think it's important that we include that the role of the authority is also very well to advise the government on matters relating to taxation, because that is a big part and a big role of the Director General, and also to represent Trinidad and Tobago internationally in respect to matters relating to taxation. And this is especially important in areas when we have to have international discussions, especially dealing with tax avoidance with multinational corporations for transfer pricing and so on. The expertise of the Director General or the authority would be required for discussions like that.
Minister?
Thank you very much. My instinctive view with respect to the proposed amendment to 6A is that it may be redundant. I'm not sure. I've had a discussion with the legal draftsman, and I believe that is the view, that it's redundant. It's, you don't need to say that. But the AG will come in due course. I have no issue with the proposed G, no problem, that the authority, one of its functions is to advise the government. That's fine. I can't agree with H, because that is the function of the executive, because taxation flows from the Audit and Exchequer Act, the Income Tax Act, and other revenue laws that are the sole responsibility of the Minister of Finance. We cannot have another body representing Trinidad and Tobago in respect to matters relating to taxation. That is a function of the Minister of Finance. But I can assure you that as Minister of Finance, I would certainly want the Revenue Authority to work on our behalf with respect to interaction in these forums and so on. But I don't think you can put it into law that they have no constitutional identity. They have no constitutional responsibility. They have no responsibility under the various revenue laws that we should legislate that they are required to represent Trinidad and Tobago. And in fact, they can't. Only the government of Trinidad and Tobago could represent Trinidad and Tobago. So I will now defer to the Attorney General.
Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wish to agree with the Minister of Finance's positions, but to put the following on the record as well. With respect to the amendment proposed in respect of Clause 6, the paragraph A, as described in Senator Dinray's amendments, the collection of which is the responsibility of the Director General. I'll just remind that the schedule has 70 laws attached to it, and receivers of revenue are attached to each one of those laws. So the liquor licensing is a magistrate, the theatre and dance hall, etc. And the Minister of Finance under the Exchequer and Audit Act identifies receivers of revenue. Some laws prescribe it. So for example, the receiver of revenue in the court is the Executive Court Administrator, and that's set out in the Payments Into and Out of Court Act, etc. So it would be inappropriate to put one person as the collector of revenue because that will collide with 70 other laws and the Exchequer and Audit Act and Constitution. The second aspect is I agree with the Honourable Senator, and I thank the Honourable Minister for agreeing to paragraph G, set out at B. In respect of H, having represented Trinidad at the Financial Action Task Force, at the other events, etc., many other events, what's required is always high-level political commitment as a matter of treaty function. Private international law and public international law requires the government of a republic to undertake representation because the Constitution is set up such that executive function is defined in the Constitution, Section 75 onward. So a government and all issues of law are represented in our Constitution by an elected government. So to put a functionary, albeit a statutory functionary, to represent the government would collide with the Constitution. It would be ultra-virus, the Constitution. So they usually go along with the minister, but cannot give constitutionally representations. So for those reasons, we couldn't agree, but I do understand the rationale, the thought process behind it, but we couldn't agree constitutionally to it.
Senator Farrer.
Chair, I was wondering whether the investigation of possible infringements and gathering evidence is implied under administration of the revenue laws and enforcement, or whether it should be specifically spelled out.
So the rationale is that it is included within enforcement and administration because the enforcement of revenue laws is so diverse across the 70 laws, going for writs of assistance, going for investigation, going for distraint, going for a number of other factors, disclosure, etc. We prefer to keep it within the law is always speaking. The minute we went down to the particularization, we're going to collide with the e justem generis rule and find ourselves debating as to what the functions are. Next.
Senator Dana-Ryan.
Thank you, Madam President. Okay, so I understand the logic behind the proposed amendment for A, and thanks for accepting the proposed amendment G. But with respect to H, I understand the logic. However, is it possible to take into consideration legislating that this individual or the authority would assist in such matter in terms of dealing with international matters relating to taxation?
Let me come in here. We have had a torrid time with the Financial Action Task Force. I don't like to use this word, but I will. I always praise the Attorney General for the work he did. I mean, that was no mean feat. But it was the Attorney General who did it. If it was anybody else, they would not have bothered with us at all. And the Global Forum and the EU is worse. They want personal commitments from the representative of the sovereign, which is the Minister of Finance or the Attorney General. They don't want a technocrat. They don't want to hear them. They want a high-level political commitment that we will do X and we will do Y. And once we've done it, they then come and monitor that high-level commitment from the politician to see whether it's done. So I don't think you could legislate inside of there that a technocrat could represent the country. I don't think you can.
Okay, thank you,
All right.
Madam
Senator
President.
Dana-Ryan. So Senator Dana-Ryan, before I put the proposed amendment, in light of the discussions, are you pursuing your amendment at 6A?
I think she said no.
I'm not too sure how this would work, but
No. If you just tell me, there's A, B, A.
okay. So A, no, I wouldn't continue.
So you're
with A.
withdrawing, correct. So let's just say you're withdrawing A. And at B, are you pursuing H?
No.
So you're withdrawing at H?
Yes.
Okay. So honorable senators, the question is that clause 6 be amended as circulated by Senator Dana-Ryan and further amended by the withdrawal of A and B sub G. Okay? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The question is that clause 6 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clause 6 as amended now stands part of the bill.
Clause 7.
The question is that clause 7 stand part of the bill. Senator Dinnerine.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, through you, I would like to suggest that under subsection 2A, 2C, that the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Finance be an ex officio member as well, together with the Director General. And the reason why I am suggesting this is because the potential conflict of interest that may occur. Now, the permanent secretary is also exposed to other policy directives from the Minister of Finance, and therefore, I see a conflict of interest potentially taking place at the board, and therefore I do not think that the permanent secretary should have any voting rights on the board.
Are you going to deal with the other point too?
Oh, and also in G, I suggest that we include for the two other persons, we should specify and say that they should be from the private sector, because we should definitely have private sector involvement, representation on the board, not only for the reason of the kind of transformation that we want with the organization. The private sector expertise would be expertise that would be critical in this transformation. With respect to the qualifications, now I've suggested that we included public administration, human resource management, industrial relation, and project management. All others, with the exception of project management, are basically self-explanatory, so I would explain project management. Now, based on the debate, what I've been hearing is that the intention is to create an agile way of thinking, an organization with an agile way of thinking, with high-performing teams. And you're trying to transform the way in which work gets done. And so it's basically a new leadership, a new mindset that you're trying to create. And with that, you need to have project management skills captured as part of the board, because the board would be responsible for creating these policies that would guide the authority in how it is managed and functions. Am I missing anything? And I believe there are two more. I suggested that we include the minister shall publish, as a subclause, the minister shall publish the appointments made in subsection 2, and every change in the appointment in the Gazette. This is for the sake of transparency, and transparency alone. And I also suggest the inclusion of subsection 6. Now, I don't know if I drafted this in the most correct way, but I also believe that the board should be empowered to have the luxury to appoint committees for any specific function. So, for example, let's say, for example, you take a loan, they take a loan and or some sort of technical assistance, and they want to, and none of them have that area of expertise, and they therefore want to establish a committee with that area of expertise to help guide the implementation of that particular technical assistance that they are requiring from any particular donor agency. And I think that captures it.
Okay, let me start from the top. Oh, sure, with somebody.
Yeah. In 3B, instead of tax or customs administration, can we say in the area of tax, customs administration? At least I think taxation is very, very important. Somebody who has experience in taxation will certainly have a wider oversight to somebody who was just in customs administration. So I don't think we should have somebody who customs administration with no experience in tax and qualifications in tax, the nature of this bill.
Okay, let me just start from the top.
Sir, if
Anybody
I may
else?
suggest,
Uh-huh.
if we could deal with what Senator Deonrine has set out in her amendment, when you finish with that, then we'll deal with what Senator Thompson-High has proposed.
Sure. It's commonplace to put a public servant on a board of an authority. The purpose of the public servant is to represent the minister and also to serve as a conduit for information going from the minister to the board and from the board to the minister. The public servant is also there to protect the government's interest. I have never seen legislation where you put a public servant and then tell them they don't have voting rights. In addition, under the Constitution, the permanent secretary is constitutionally protected from an errant minister who may want to give some sort of oppressive instruction to a permanent secretary. A permanent secretary does not have to follow the instructions of a minister. So that I don't agree that the permanent secretary be subject to the directives of the minister. In a general sense, yes, but not in a specific sense in terms of anything inimical to the authority. So I don't agree that the permanent secretary should be ex officio, because if the permanent secretary is going to be ex officio, they shouldn't be there at all. The reason why the Director General is ex officio is that he's an employee of the authority, and you don't want an employee making policy about himself. So that's why you have these boards where quite often you will see the CEO or the Director General or whatever, the person in charge, the top employee is there, and they have no vote because you don't want them voting on themselves. You don't want to create a conflict of interest for them. But I see no conflict of interest with the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Finance because of the Public Service Commission and the constitutional protection that a Permanent Secretary has. But I'll come back to that in a while. On H, my first thought was it's a conflict of interest to have somebody from the private sector on a tax authority where they may have an interest in their own taxation matters. I'm just saying that's my first thought. But then when I look at it very carefully, that's the only area that the Honourable Senator has asked that we make it clear that these people come from the private sector. So I'm okay with this. I don't know what the AG would have to say. I see no problem in ensuring that at least 2 people on this board are from the private sector. I have no problem with that. Instinctively, I didn't like it because of the fact that you may have somebody from a large corporation who may have a tax matter and may want to influence it in the board, but I assume the conflict of interest provisions will kick in with that person, so I'm supporting the recommendation of Senator Deonrine to add in from the private sector. No problem there. The 5 years, that every board member has to have 5 years, that's a little rough. You may not be able to get sufficient people with 5 years experience in all of these areas. We've had that problem before. Some boards, we just can't fill them, you know. I mean, I've seen boards where a year will pass and you can't find a person. In fact, I had that recently with one of the boards that report to me, where it said the person must have 5 years. And we got a nominee who looked excellent, but they had 4 years and 11 months. So we had to scrap the appointment and put someone. So I don't mind putting an amount, but maybe 3 years or something like that. So that is something we could talk about. I just want to go through my reaction, then the AG will come in, and then you could always respond, Senator, to what I have said. The next thing, I think your proposed new 5 is already the practice. Is that not so, AG? I think these things are published as of course. I think you don't need to say it. They have to be published. So when you look at any copy of the Gazette, you will see appointments made to these things. So I don't think I think it's a bit redundant. 6, the only part of 6 I didn't like, again, I'm not sure that 6 is relevant. I think it may be redundant. I think this board already has that power. Okay. I'm being told that the law allows the board to fund committees but doesn't have a specific power to form committees. So that's fine. The only problem I had with this is that you can't put people on these committees who are not members of the board, because the government will lose entire control of this matter. Who knows if you give the board that kind of power, because you go on to say, where it says, for purposes which, in the opinion of the board, would be better regulated and managed by these committees. So you could have a situation where the board could make a whole set of committees of unknown persons. There's no oversight, there's no accountability, and these persons then do things that are adverse. So, and it is very unusual to see, I've never seen that in law either, that you would give a board power to appoint committees that would be able to regulate the functions of the board who are not members of the board. So I can't agree with those words, who are not members of the board. So to recap, I'm okay with 6 except for the words who are not members of the board. I think 5 is already in law, and if it is, it's not necessary. I would say 3 years instead of 5, and private sector okay, and I don't agree with the ex officio nature of the permanent secretary for the reasons stated. AG?
May I, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, thank you. I saw your hand moving, so I wasn't sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Honourable Minister. Madam Chair, on the point of ex officio, just to let you know that at the Law Revision Committee, we had a lot of discussion on this particular point. And it was the CPC himself that raised the point that the voice of a public servant who is not from within that entity itself, the Director General, because the Director General is ex officio from that point. The caution is usually put that you're ex officio, meaning you don't have a vote, on the basis of your coming within. So the usual structures for making somebody ex officio, removing their ability, sometimes to be automatically included or not, is usually accompanied by a prohibition against voting. You'll note that we didn't add that on this occasion, right? So we say that the Director General is ex officio, meaning that he will always be, or she will always be, a part of the board. The Permanent Secretary is a member of the board, and therefore whomever the Permanent Secretary is always going to be there. So just to draw the distinction, when we say the Director General, who shall be an ex officio member of the board, it's because the Director General comes from within the entity. Stating that the Permanent Secretary is there means that the Permanent Secretary needs to be there. So we didn't use ex officio because the person is outside of the entity. We used ex officio because the person is within the entity. So we don't need to say ex officio member of the board. The private sector, again, I join in supporting that position. I think any modern revenue authority can do with a point of reference, and I think it's a very commendable improvement to the law, and I thank the Honourable Senator for it. I too support it. The 5 years experience, I think that the areas of broadening practice are welcomed. In dealing with Senator Deonarine saying tax or customs administration, which is what the bill itself says, and in distinguishing what Senator Thompson-Ayi has recommended, the reason why I would keep tax or customs administration is because we're bringing in 2 separate divisions: the Tax Division, Board of Inland Revenue, and the many laws associated with that, and then on the customs administration, customs and excise, so that it was intended that the administrative factors of that should have positions. Remember, subsection 3 is dealt with in 2 parts. It's A and B, so that you're looking at a very careful construct. Now, in reference to the 5 years, if I'd asked Senator Deonarine to please look at it this way: the members shall be selected from persons who, A, have demonstrated the capacity to oversee and have considerable experience in overseeing the management of large and diverse organizations, and So A takes you to your 5-year consideration. Because you may have somebody who is just so brilliant and has considerable expertise and has demonstrated themselves really well with 2 years. So the combination of A and B, I think, achieves the mischief which you're seeking to address in proposing 5 years. Because what would be required here is that when the president's office is looking at these instruments of appointment, because cabinet will appoint. When you say minister, minister means cabinet. They go to the office of the president. The president will look and scrub the CVs, and I'd like to inform that it is the president's practice, every president, to reject if the president's opinion is that the CV doesn't demonstrate the level of expertise required. So I would respectfully suggest that the 5-year experience is not necessary because of the combination between A and B, A giving you the relief to the mischief that you have correctly addressed your mind to. But I just wanted to point it out in a slightly different way for your consideration. The fact is that all appointments are gazetted. So the gazette happens the minute the instruments of appointments are done. The legal notice of who has the function and power, if an HDC board is appointed, if this one is appointed, etc., all of that is gazetted. And the use of committees, I'd just like to flag a cautionary point here. Remember that we're going to put oaths of secrecy. We're going to have positions where you have disclaimers and recusals and disclosures of interest, which are very carefully managed in this law. A lot of the reflections here resemble the integrity in public life construct. There's a principle in law that says that the delegatee is subsidiary to the delegator, and that you can't go with the delegation outside the original guy. So the guy you're appointing can't be wider or broader or bigger and functioning larger ways than you, the person who's appointing him. And if you look at the language here, the board would be better regulated and managed by such a committee. So that lends itself to ultra vires, meaning outside with, right? So my first caution in adopting committees is that we're going to dilute the confidentiality provisions. We're going to invite conflicts of interest in terms of disclosures, etc. The language as set up is potentially ultra vires, the power to delegate. But I want to let you know that a board, in the exercise of its fiduciary functions, has the ability to call for and receive advice, etc., and to have, in effect, delegated functions by way of advice. But we want the fiduciary obligation. You are liable, because this law sets up liability as well. Later down in the bill, you see that there's liability if you've done it wrong. We don't want to exculpate the board from liability. So for those several reasons, I most respectfully suggest that we ought not to venture down the recommendation in 6.
Senator Vera.
Thank you. You kind of answered my question, but I'll still put it on the record. I'm looking at 3B, area of tax or customs administration. And I was wondering whether the word administration might have been limiting or superfluous, because if I say law administration, business administration, it connotes a totally different thing. So I was wondering whether in the area of revenue or customs, but you did say that that was a carefully designed construct, so that was what my concern was.
Thank you.
Senator Dionarine.
Thank you, Madam President. With response to the responses, with respect to the committees, I understand what both the Honorable AG and the Minister of Finance is saying, but I have a question though. When the board comes into effect, right? And of course, right after the board comes into effect, they need to draft policies, they need to create the strategic plan which they submit to the Minister of Finance. And then they have to go ahead and create all these other different policies to practically set up the authority. So you're basically going to have a project implementation plan, and you may very well need to have something like a steering committee. In instances like that, how would the board go about forming a steering committee?
we can look at. I mean, I have no problem with putting in giving the board the ability to form committees, you know. It's just what do these committees do? And I think these committees should just assist the board. That's it. And then the AG is telling me to be careful. And he's right, because this is a very sensitive area of public life, of national life. It's tax matters are protected under the Income Tax Act in terms of secrecy. And, you know, you have a board that is held responsible. If you catch them, in fact, you have in fact put in a clause later on talking about how to remove a member of the board if they misbehave. How are you going to remove a member of a committee? They're not part of the structure of the legislation. I'm talking about the minister. How is the minister going to remove a member of a committee because the minister is not appointing the committee? So I understand the caution that the AG is sounding there.
Senator C. Prasad.
If I could just add some clarification, Minister. In the normal course of a board, the board have subcommittees.
Of course.
And it could be a mixture of members of the board as well as members of management or whatever. And that committee reports to the board. And it doesn't have to be...
Right.
It doesn't have to be part of...
Correct.
Well, that's just the way the board operates. It's in the normal course of operations, that's done.
Let me just say something. You're leading me to a particular point. The board would appoint committees. It may have members of the management, members of the board, but the responsibility is that of the board. When you put it this way, you're talking about committees that could regulate and manage that. You don't want that. Those committees you're talking about, a board could set up any number of committees, and it can form these committees from members of management and members of the board. But those committees are not responsible. It is the board that is responsible. Okay, and therefore I take the AG's caution that the board could do it anyway. It doesn't have to be in the law. They can establish any committee they want. But it is the board that has the responsibility. So I think we would not be able to agree to this 6.
Attorney General, you wanted to say something?
I have no need. Senator C. Prasad and the Minister have addressed what I would have wanted to. Thank you.
Senator Dionarine.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I understand. Also, I just, for clarification, going back to the minimum years of experience. Now, I know through you, Madam President, the Minister of Finance said he would have been okay with 3 years, but the Attorney General didn't entirely agree. So is it that we are agreeing with 3 years or not?
Attorney General.
If I could respectfully suggest that we don't put in a time frame because of the conjunctive operation of paragraphs A and B. I respectfully believe they deal with the mischief that you were seeking to address in your proposal.
Could I just make another point? I have had personal experience of a president, who shall not be named, who did not accept the cabinet's appointment of a particular individual because in the view of that president, the person did not have, as we see here, demonstrated the capacity to oversee and have considerable experience in overseeing the management of a large and diverse organization. I actually spoke to that president about it, and I was persuaded by that president that that president was right, and I had to withdraw the appointment and bring a next person who had better qualifications. So the AG is making an important point that there's a check and balance at President's House that I don't think the general public is aware of. They look at the words in the law and they apply them to the nominees, and if they believe it's not so, the President will be advised by his or her legal advisor that this person doesn't meet the requirements. So I don't think we need to put in the 5 years, because if you have the capacity to oversee and have considerable experience in overseeing the management of a large, it's not just large and diverse organization, then you could have 4 years. You could have 4 years, 6 months. So I wouldn't want to put that in there.
So at this stage, I just want to ask either the Minister of Finance or the Attorney General to respond to Senator Thompson-Aye.
I honestly had no problem with Senator Aye's proposal, but I saw what the AG was saying. And I don't know if it's going to be redundant, but we're looking for tax administration and customs administration. I don't know if we have to repeat the word administration whether it, causes a convoluted clause. So I would defer to the AG and the draftsman on this.
Attorney General.
Madam Chair, if it's comforting to honourable members, the reason why I'm careful to keep it as it is, which is tax or customs administration, administration applying to both, also includes the fact that we brought this bill forward after many years of consultation, including with the wide sector in the Joint Select Committee that we engaged in the 2017, 2018, 2019 period. And the BIR and other entities and positions came before us, and this is now the second time we'll be accepting the same formula, but on the back of it having been accepted after full consultation. So I've been very careful to read the umpteen reports. I actually have them here with me, and for those reasons I prefer that we stay close to the text as it is.
Senator
If I may.
Senator Thompson-Aye.
Yes. You see, in these days, we have so many people who have multiple disciplines. So you may find someone with tax who is also, most of them are, a lot of them are into accounting, economics, law, business, all the relevant fields. So you might find somebody with tax administration, also somebody else with custom administration who have these other things. And certainly it would, because of the nature of this bill, it would enhance what they bring to the table. So in those circumstances, I didn't want to have an either-or situation, tax or custom administration, but you might get out of those two persons the rest of the qualifications you're looking for: accounting, economics, law, business. A lot of people have law degrees who are into accounting and working in the tax sector. So it's in those circumstances, the world is so different now, especially with the women who are studying and qualifying and overqualifying themselves.
Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do understand. Thank Senator Thompson-Aye for explaining what the Honourable Senator intended. I just want to assure the law as drafted means that you can hit any one of the baskets. They are not conjunctive.
Yeah.
So as drafted, it is designed to be that you can hit any one of the bells or all. And I would like to say that I am confident that young men are qualifying as well as young women.
That's what I was saying.
Because they work really hard too in a world where we can't
study.
find our men in the workplace sometimes.
Senator Dana Ryan. And
Yeah.
we're now wrapping up because we've spent a considerable amount of time on this clause.
Yeah. Just to comment on that same point on tax or customs administration, I'm actually in agreement with the Honorable Attorney General, primarily because the tax and customs administration are two completely diverse fields, and sometimes tax administration is so different from what someone qualified in the area of customs can do. So just to reinforce that point.
So Senator Dana Ryan, may I ask you, at your amendment, A, are you pursuing?
No.
C, are you pursuing?
I believe that the Honorable AG and the Minister of Finance did accept part of it with respect to the qualifications, human resource management, industrial relations, and project management.
Yeah. Yeah, just to take out
So
the 5.
I would not proceed with putting in the minimum years of
I think she's on.
experience, but with respect to the other part, I would proceed with it.
Attorney General, can you just guide me so that I can?
Yes, please, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
If the Honourable Senator is agreeing to amend paragraph C, B as is quoted there, by deleting the words "and minimum of 5 years experience," then it would read, have qualifications, and experience. No, so we're deleting the words minimum of 5 years. So it would read, have qualifications and experience in the area of tax or customs, that's exactly as we have administration, comma, corporate management, that is as is in the bill and repeated here, or areas, that is as the bill, such as, that is in the bill, accounting, that is in the bill, economics, that is in the bill, law, that is in the bill, business, public administration, human resource management, industrial relations, project management. All of that would be new, and the Minister of Finance indicated that he was comfortable with that. So if the Honourable Senator is amending to simply delete the words minimum of 5 years, then we will happily accept, subject to the Minister of Finance's objection, that amendment.
Right?
Yes, I agree. I agree to the removal of the words minimum of 5 years.
Okay, thank you. And D?
I will withdraw those. I am satisfied with the explanations provided.
Honourable Senators, the question is that clause 7 be amended as circulated by Senator Deonarine in respect of B and C in the list of amendments as circulated by Senator Deonarine. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Just go it over. Honourable Senators, the question is that clause 7 be amended as circulated by Senator Deonarine at B and C of her list of amendments, and further amended at CB by deleting the words minimum of 5 years. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Honourable Senators, the question is that clause 7 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the ayes have it. Clause 7 as amended now stands part of the bill.
Clause 8.
The question is that clause 8 stand part of the bill. Senator Deonarine.
Thank you, Madam President. With respect to 8.1 sub C, I found that the word the finances was a little bit catch-all phrase, like a catch-all phrase, and it spoke about real property and other assets when I think the intention is really to formulate, approve, and ensure implementation of proper asset management. So I just was trying to kind of tighten up the language a little bit, because to me it seemed unclear as asset management being one of the functions, and with one of the responsibilities, I deleted the words the securing of contracts, because right after that it says the procurement of goods and services, and the procurement of goods and services includes the securing of contracts, whether it is a contract for a good or a service. So that was, to me, seemed very redundant. With respect to 8.1 sub E, I included between the word performance and targets a performance management system with targets, just to be clear on exactly what it is that the board should be responsible for formulating, approving, and ensuring implementation. Again, it is a dynamic organization that we are trying to establish, one that we have a lot of transformation responsibilities for, and we need to have an adequate and sufficient performance management system with targets. With respect to G, is it that the budget, and this is a matter of question here, the budget, is it that the authority would be submitting to the Minister of Finance or only annual budgets, or is it that they would also be preparing quarterly budgets as well? And I believe that it's not clear that they are also responsible for the monitoring of the operation plan. So I thought that we should include it. And the final thing that I thought that should be included was enterprise risk management. Now, a big part of the tax administration diagnostic assessment tool that the IMF did was there was a lot of risk management issues highlighted in that report in terms of the tax administration. and the management of the internal controls of the organization, and therefore I thought it was essential that we include enterprise risk management.
Attorney General. Okay, Minister.
Okay, the amendment to 8C. Finances has a meaning. It's a term of art. And it means not just the requirements, it also means expenditure. So I have no problem with the financial requirements. I just was wondering if we would get a little too wordy if we just put finances, financial requirements. But I understand where you're coming from in terms of the cash needs of the organization. The word asset before management is redundant. Look at it very carefully. Asset management of real property and other assets. So you're asset managing assets. So it's really management of real property and other assets, right? So you don't need to have the word asset before management. And if we move on, so if the drafters have no problem, I would. What's that? No, I'm just saying. Let me finish. If the drafters have no problems, I would put finances, financial requirements, etc. I'm a little lost as to what is intended by the amendment that adds in management system with, because the targets are performance targets. The way it's worded, you have this whole concept nowadays of KPIs, key performance indicators. These are KPIs, really. This is the draftsman's way of defining a KPI, performance targets. When you add in the words management system with, I'm not sure. It's not a system you're looking at indicators. So I'm not sure about that, but let the drafters, the AG, advise. Yes, you usually ask these entities to give you an annual budget. It's done with the National Insurance Board as well. And what that is the cost of running the organization. It is not the money that they collect. So it's the cost of salaries, wages, rent, whatever expenses they may have. That's their budget. So there's nothing wrong with them presenting it on an annual basis. Monitoring the operation plan, I have no objection to that in principle. Enterprise risk management, excellent suggestion. So, AG, over to you.
Madam Chair, if I could just take the Honourable Senator, first of all, to 8.1, the chapeau, before we break down into the numbers, right? Subject to subsection 2, the board shall be responsible for formulating, approving, and ensuring the implementation of management policies in relation to. So the use of management in the sub-paragraphs, therefore, becomes redundant. It's OTOs, which is what the minister was referring to. But I just wanted to tag it back to the chapeau, which is why it didn't make sense, although I understood what you were saying with it, right? So that's the first point. The second point when we're looking at C is we purposefully went with general terms. Finances, which includes all aspects of finances. Real property, which is all aspects of real property, and other assets, because we want to deal with the intangibles and shows in action. Intellectual property rights, physical assets, bank accounts, which are shows in action, fungible matters, etc. So these were very specifically designed this way because they are the largest categorization of description in law. If we were to take too fine a tune on this, we would lose the broader aspects. So that's the rule of statutory interpretation, and Benyon sets that out, etc., for those of us who had to go through the pains of learning legislative drafting from time to time. So respectfully, I think that the proposed amendment to 8C, for those reasons, I think I would invite the Honourable Senator to reconsider. Senator? She wanted to say something?
Yeah, I didn't get a response to the removal of the words the securing of contracts.
Yeah, I was coming, I see. So procurement of goods, services, and you said that you had removed securing of contracts.
Securing of contracts, because procurement is...
Right. So securing of contracts versus procurement of goods and services. So procurement of goods and services, the procurement can be by express contract or by implied contract or by transactional contracts, meaning a series of contracts put together. So the securing of a contract is separate and apart from a procurement cycle. So a procurement can be done on an iterant basis, one by one. It can be done by offer and acceptance. It can be done by an invitation to treat. There are multiple ways of having contracts put in law. So there is a material distinction between securing of contracts and procurement of goods and services, particularly when we now get down to e-procurement. When we're using the e-procurement and reverse auction systems, that's a matter of a computer algorithm which defines the contract on an invitation to treat and acceptance basis. Sorry for being unduly thick in the law, but that's the only way to describe it. So that is the rationale for distinguishing between procurement of goods and services and securing of contracts, and why we'd want to have securing of contracts. If I go to Strat Plan, Annual Budget, Monitoring of Operation Plan, I would leave that up to the Honourable Minister. I just want to say that L is a fantastic improvement. I think enterprise risk management in the manner that you have described it is totally different from tax compliance, and I think that that helps us to understand the risks that the institution will face, and I quite frankly love it. E3, by inserting the words in the public interest after the word expedient, my caution in accepting in the public interest is that you sometimes act in interests which are beyond the public interest. You may act in private interests. You may act in out of fiduciary responsibility or obligation. So if I look at it in subsection 3, 2(3), the minister may give the board such general policy directive with respect to the carrying out of its functions under this act as he considers necessary or expedient, and you are proposing in the public interest, and the board shall give effect to such directives. The minister has to act in multiple platforms and not only in the public interest. The public interest is one of the requirements that will be in the mind of a public entity, but it is not the only requirement that factors into obligations, etc. So I couldn't recommend in the public interest because it would exclude other interests which are equally important.
Madam President, I just have one response to the comment the Attorney General had on in the public interest. Now, but my question then is, in this case, in this scenario, the minister would be given the board general policy directions about the board and about the authority. Could the Attorney General give me an example in which the Minister of Finance would be conducting this function of giving general policy directive in private interest? Yeah.
Sure. So if we were dealing with a fiduciary obligation of confidentiality that concerned the safety of an individual, that's not necessarily solely in the public interest. It crosses two realms.
Okay.
And surely confidentiality, security of somebody's going to be an enforcement officer and we want to anonymize their records. That's not only in the public interest. That's in the interest of the individual and their protection to life and limb and liberty, etc., their confidentiality. So there are a few blurred lines. The problem with law, every word that we're going to put into law is going to be interpreted by the court, and then they're going to say, well, what did Parliament in its wisdom mean by in the public interest only? And then if a circumstance comes up that is outside of the public interest, then they're going to say, well, the minister acted ultra vires. So because somebody else in the separation of powers, in this case the court, is going to construe, and the classic description that they put out in their records is, what did Parliament in its wisdom mean by confining these words only into the public interest? And that's my caution.
Okay.
So based on what I have just heard, I think the Attorney General has indicated an acceptance of D. I haven't heard anything in terms of a positive response to any of the others.
Madam President, if I may, I believe that there was an acceptance of C, with respect to the annual budget and the monitoring of the operation
I think that
plan.
was for the Minister of Finance. So C has been accepted as well. Okay, Senator Dearine, with respect to A,
I would withdraw.
B,
I withdraw as well.
and E.
I would withdraw.
Honorable Senators, the question is that clause 8 be amended as circulated by Senator Dearine. Those in favor? At C and D, those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Honorable Senators, the question is that clause 8 is amended, now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 8 is amended, now stands part of the bill.
Clauses 9 and 10.
Question is that clauses 9 and 10 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 9 and 10 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 9 and 10 now stand part of the bill.
Clause 11.
The question is that clause 11 stand part of the bill. Senator Dearine.
Thank you, Madam President. I sought to put forward two amendments in this clause. The first one in clause 11, subsection 2, which gives some definition into the time frame when the notice of resignation is submitted to the minister. And the second thing I sought to do was to provide some definition to how a criteria to remove a member. I didn't see it properly captured in the clause, and therefore I put forward the suggestion to establish a criteria under which any member would be removed from the board.
John, unless the AG disagrees, that's a very useful insertion. Unless the AG disagrees.
Minister, that's at B you're speaking about, right?
Yeah.
Not A.
No, I'm coming to A.
Okay.
I don't think A is practical because this is a voluntary act. The person is resigning because they want to resign. The person may wish to resign right away. They may not be able to give notice. I'll give you a very benign reason why a person might resign. Illness. Something may come to them that they have a serious illness, which they can no longer perform their function. They can't give 30 days notice, might have to give 3 days notice. So if somebody is voluntarily resigning, I don't think you should tie them down to having to give 30 days notice. That's just my opinion. Okay. With respect to the other ones, I have no problem, AG, unless you have a problem.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. I thank the Honourable Minister of Finance. With respect to A, the giving of 30 days notice is usual in a contract where you still have services to perform, and therefore it's reasonable to give the employer notice that you intend to depart. In this case here, there may be need for immediate action.
The person might also have a problem and want to go.
Okay, sure. No problem. Apologies.
Yeah, not at all. So the immediacy of action is required. There could not be circumstances where a board member would be required to continue to perform beyond the manner in which he or she is capable of performing, and therefore we ought not to fetter their ability to resign without notice, because it's not an employer-employee relationship, it's a fiduciary relationship, and a fiduciary relationship is terminable at will, provided you don't breach the fiduciary context that you're in. So that would be outside of the normal parameters of law. In respect of 7, believe it or not, it's the Minister of Finance himself who relies upon the Interpretation Act and the power to appoint and the power to disappoint, which comes about in case law coming out of the TT Post structure, dealt with when Keith Sobian was Attorney General many years ago. So if you look at 11.3, if a member dies, resigns, is removed, that is removed is something that is associated with cause, dishonesty, incapability, other factors, etc. So whilst it is, A is quite normal, in statutory, you'll tend to find absence for a certain number of statutory meetings where people are usually elected. So you'll see it in the Tobago House of Assembly, you'll see it in the Municipal Corporations Act, you'll see it where they have an obligation to be there. The member has been found to be physically or mentally incapable of performing his or her duties efficiently, and the member's medical doctor has issued a certificate to that effect. This is removal. Sometimes it may be involuntarily accepted as opposed to the member submitting the medical certificate. So I was cautious about that because you are deemed to be medically unfit if the provisions of the medical board, if you have to have a doctor's certificate, it may be voluntary or involuntary. Somebody may board you. There may be a committee of the patient appointed for you where people go under the Mental Health Act and say, John Brown is not well. They go and they get psychological assessments and the court deems you to be unfit as opposed to you deeming yourself to be unfit. So the voluntary demonstration of a medical certificate goes outside of the other ways by which you may deem to be medically unfit or mentally unfit or physically unfit. The member contravenes the provisions of this act. That's extremely broad because you may have contravention that is without liability. There may be innocent infringer. It has to carry with it what we call in law a turpitude, something that is wrong to the point where you deserve to be done, to be put out. And that's usually where you say somebody has committed an act of dishonesty or they've been convicted of an indictable offense with a term of imprisonment beyond 12 years. Person is found guilty of unprofessional conduct by a body constituted for the purposes of adjudicating on discipline. Again, quite broad. So these parameters cause me concern because they step outside of the normal structure by which we remove board members. And the Interpretation Act applies in this instance. This is to be materially distinguished from the manner in which we deal with the removal of the Director General or the Deputy Director General for Enforcement. In the Deputy Director General for Enforcement, you're dealing with the Public Services rules, the Public Services Commission that has the sole authority to discipline and remove. In respect of the Director General, because that person is so important a function, affirmed by the Parliament, etc., you want to have specificity with that office holder. But the board members, I'd prefer to rely upon the law as it's currently operationalized, where a member has the ability to be removed, and then the law speaks to how that can happen in usual circumstances. So whilst I understand the intent for certainty, the problem with the draft as it's created is that there are some danger zones inside of the draft for the reasons I've just explained.
Thank you for that explanation, Attorney General. So then, just to confirm, there is provision in there via the Interpretation Act by the use of the word is removed from in subsection 3 that allows for a criteria to be followed to remove a member of the board.
Yes, he who appoints has the power to disappoint.
Okay. Thank you.
So, Senator Dionarai.
Yeah, I will withdraw the whole amendment.
So, Honourable Senators, the question is the clause 11 now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clause 11 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 12.
Question is, the clause 12 stand part of the bill. Senator Dionarai.
Right. I don't know if the Minister of Finance could explain to me why it is the board needs to submit to the Minister of Finance the rules that govern the conduct of the affairs of the board and why it shall be submitted for approval. And I would like to get some examples as well, because to me, I see this as being a little bit of too much involvement, and therefore, because the whole aim of this hybrid model and trying to create a semi-autonomous revenue authority is to give the board some flexibility, but just not too much flexibility, but enough flexibility to empower the board so that they can conduct at least some affairs on their own.
Minister?
Example of Parliament. Parliament regulates its own affairs, but doesn't do so in a vacuum. It does by way of motion, subject to a vote. So there is some form of control over the rules that govern Parliament, the standing orders, for example. If you allow a board just to make its own rules, then they're law unto themselves. So the whole purpose of this is to have some measure of control over the way the board conducts itself. I understand what you're saying in terms of what it appears to be the intrusive nature of the clause, but I don't think you could allow a board to make its own rules without any oversight at all.
So then,
So AG, I don't know if you could help.
Attorney General?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I go back to the Constitution, Section 64. I go to the Exchequer and Audit Act. The Minister of Finance, being the repository of the monies of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in the Constitution, in the Exchequer and Audit Act, it is critical that there's a degree and line of sight for the regulatory functions, because ultimately the minister is responsible for that and accountable to the country in respect of that. So whilst you have a parent act, which we're passing, hopefully, or we're considering, whilst you have revenue laws, etc., which are going on, all laws that spring therefrom usually have a fact that subsidiary instruments, regulations, and rules have to go through an approval process for them to meet with the structures of law. Otherwise, they are unapproved. This is different from a corporation. So we're creating a statutory body. We're not doing a limited liability company where the minister's corporation sole. That would be different. What we're doing is we're creating a statutory authority, and therefore there has to be transparency to know what is approved or not, or what is not approved. This fits in with public procurement. It fits in with all of the routes for subsidiary, because ultimately the obligation is going to come to the Minister of Finance under the Constitution and under the Exchequer and Audit provisions. So because we're dealing with a statutory authority, you have to continue the line of supervision and approval.
Senator C. Prasad?
Can I just ask, so for all statutory authorities, the line minister approves the rules and regulations that the board operates under?
Yes, and in default of that, the law will speak. So for instance, you'll see in the HDC Act, for instance, you'll see that the Central Tenders Committee rules had to be developed, and in default, the rules that the board had to approve tendering and procurement procedures to be approved by the minister, and in default, the Central Tenders Board would act. So there's sometimes default provisions that are put where it doesn't speak specifically.
Senator Vera?
Thank you.
Just to point out that this section pretty much mirrors the Interpretation Act about Section 35, which talks about who will preside at meetings, and then also about majorities making the decision would be at Section 50. So it's consistent with the general law.
Thank you.
May I also say, regulations are usually made by a minister. Most laws have that. In fact, I don't know any law establishing an authority that reports to a minister that does not have a clause or section that says the minister may make regulations. And those regulations would quite naturally deal with the way the board conducts itself. So, in this very law, there is a power of the minister to make regulations. Okay? So I don't think there's any harm in it. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Senator Dinarine?
Madam President, I will withdraw.
Honourable Senators, the question is that Clause 12 now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clause 12 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 13.
The question is that Clause 13 stand part of the bill. Senator Dinarine?
Thank you, Madam President. This inclusion of the minimum years of experience is similar to the line of reasoning that I had for the board, and I just see the Director General and the Deputy Directors General as persons with significant core experience and expertise, and I feel that a timeline should be given. However, I would listen to whatever justification that both the Minister of Finance and the Attorney General has. No, and I also would like to include public administration in the line of areas of skill and expertise. And that is primarily because we are dealing with revenue and the role of the Director General in terms of the administration of the authority. And sometimes public administration is one skill that a lot of persons who may be versed in different, who maybe have a lot of experience in the area of public administration, which includes public policy and public financial management and so on, they tend to be very experienced in this area of revenue management and tax administration.
Yeah, hello. You didn't have to say all of that. All I would say is I completely agree, but I would like to make it 5 years instead of 7.
Okay, no problem.
Okay? And public administration, I totally agree. Should we just change it to 5? We could ask her.
So, Minister, you are seeking to say 5 years.
5.
And what did you say about public administration?
I accept everything else.
Everything
just
else.
change 7 to 5.
Senator Dionarine, you are okay with that?
Yes, I am, Madam President.
So, Honorable Senators, the question is that Clause 13 be amended as circulated by Senator Dionarine and further amended to substitute 5 years instead of 7 years. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Honorable Senators, the question is that Clause 13 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clause 13 as amended now stands part of the bill.
Clause
The
14.
question is that Clause 14 stand part of the bill. Senator Dionarine.
Thank you, Madam President. With respect to Clause 14, right. So, in terms of the responsibility of the Director General, I found that we could have gone into a little more detail to explain his responsibilities. So I went ahead and expanded subsection C to include that even though he will be advising the minister on his own initiative or at the request of the minister, I think that we should include that he would be advising on issues of revenue implications, tax administration, and aspects of policy changes relating to all taxes referred to in the schedule. That is the first amendment, and I also think that, and this is something that was not captured, and I believe it should be a significant role or function and responsibility of the Director General, is the collection and processing of statistics needed to provide forecasts and tax receipts, study revenue laws, and so on. Because a main part of the Director General is to conduct that analysis on revenue forecasting and so on. I do not think it is the sole responsibility of the budget division in the Ministry of Finance. It is something that would have to be done hand in hand with the Ministry of Finance, Budget Division, and the Revenue Authority.
Advice of the Attorney General. I have no problem with this. Okay. AG, up to you.
So, Madam Chair, I really like B. It dovetails with the NSITT, the National Statistics
Institute. Yes, that
Institute.
is the primary reason.
It's a fight that the country is facing, and I think it's a brilliant addition to it. C, I just want to say this aloud to my own team member on the far left of me. I'm just wondering if we should, I'm wondering about the impact of ejusdem generis, advising the minister on his own initiative or at the request of the minister on revenue implications, tax administration, and aspects of policy changes relating to all taxes referred to in the schedule, comma, any matter that could affect policy or public finances, and any other matter that the minister considers could improve the effectiveness or efficiency. Okay, having read it aloud, Madam Chair, I think that we're good. So I would warmly receive the recommendations at A and B. Has the honourable member dealt with C?
Oh, sorry, I forgot C. Where is C? Okay. Oh, right. So I addressed this during the debate. The law here says that the enforcement division will be staffed by the Public Service Commission. But then this clause here says such other employees of the authority as the board thinks fit. So, but when the Minister of Finance was piloting the bill, he said that those persons that would be hired in the enforcement division would be an administrative function, would serve only an administrative function and not an enforcement function. But the law does not say so. So I just wanted to get clarification on that, please. Yeah.
Carefully at 3A. 3A makes it clear that the persons doing the enforcement are public officers. But if you go down to the bottom of 3A, it says other public officers who may, for the purposes of the enforcement of the laws, exercise the powers, authorities, and privileges conferred by those laws. So in order to have an enforcement function, enforcement power, you have to be a public officer. Okay. These people that the authority would be appointing would not be public officers.
Okay. All right, I understand.
When I saw the Deputy Director General / Enforcement, I was wondering whether you were modeling this office after the UK Director of Revenue and Customs Prosecutions. Now, we're talking about enforcement. And so in the UK, that officer is responsible for criminal investigations and prosecutions, as well as bringing civil proceedings, for example, getting injunctions and so on. But we don't speak about any of this specifically, and I was wondering whether there's a reason for that.
I don't think we need to, because remember they're enforcing those 70 laws. So when you go into those 70 laws, you'll see that enforcement means prosecution and all those things. But AG, I'll hand it over to you.
It's just I don't want us to be caught flat-footed and say ultra-virus, you know, but if you check it,
So, Madam Chair, I thank Senator Vera for raising this very important point. It goes towards one of the issues of constitutionality. And secondly, the Minister of Finance is perfectly correct. So we looked at this extremely carefully. To answer your question as to whether we really modeled Kenya most of all, because Kenya took a progressive step towards its revenue authority introduction for the same reasons that we face in Trinidad and Tobago right now, where there was not the kind of support from parliamentary positions as was required. So they took a progressive step. For instance, the Criminal Investigation Unit at the Board of Inland Revenue will continue to function. They will be vested with all of those prosecutorial functions, etc. Senator Evans Welch is a long-standing prosecutor for that unit for the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago with a blazing track record, for example. So they continue to function in the prosecutorial and other factions, and the springboard for their authority is within those 70 laws. So we did look at that. I want to just repeat for the record that in looking at the separation of powers issue, we are coming with amendments to many of these 70 laws as we scrub each and every one of them so that we avoid arguments on saved law versus non-saved law.
And that was also my concern, coinciding those.
Yes, yes. So the constitutional issues on the table, 4A, property, 4C, privacy, separation of powers. Those are the only constitutional issues. this has been discussed for 20 years. And bearing in mind where laws are going to at present, if I look at the Neverson judgment in the CCJ, if I look at the attack on saved law provisions that is now current in many jurisdictions, upfront preparation as Attorney General requires me to look at this issue carefully. So I'd just like to address for the record that it's not any one single piece of advice that the government has received. There's been over 20 years of advice on different iterations, but the constitutional issues are really narrow. The use of the Public Service Commission in the enforcement aspects is the material aspect for treating with property A, 4A rights, and 4C rights. In addition to the civil functions and writs of assistance that are provided in the customs law, for example, etc. So there is high court scrutiny, and then there's balance, because the most recent case of judicial review against the DPP, first of its kind, where the DPP has been judicially reviewed on the DPP's exercise of a Section 90 power, now brings to life JR as a further tool and Section 14 of the Constitution as well. So I'm just putting that on the record so that when we're interpreted and they look to the pepper and heart principles, that we're clear on the record.
Ryan?
Thank you, Madam President. Under the same clause 14 in subsection 5, I had a general question that I wanted clarification on, for which I didn't propose an amendment. So if I may ask the question, Madam President, is with respect to the performance of the functions, not necessarily performance of the functions, but the Director General, it's not clear that the Director General and the Deputy Director General of Enforcement, whether they are on the same lines of authority or whether the Deputy Director General of Enforcement reports to the Director General. Now, it says in here that the Deputy Director General of Enforcement receives general policy directive from the Minister of Finance and the board through the Director General. Does that indirectly means that he reports to the Director General? Because it's not clear here. And why I want this to be clarified is because the Deputy Director General of Enforcement is a public officer who is appointed, subjected to disciplinary control, promotion, and performance appraisals and everything by the Public Service Commission, whereas you have the Director General, who I don't know exactly where he is situated, and therefore I don't want us creating something that the Director General can't tell the Director General of Deputy Director General of Enforcement what to do. Yeah.
Look at clause 5, C and D of 14. Sorry, subclause 5, C and D of 14. Notice that it refers to subsection 2A in subclause 5C and subsection 2B in subclause 5D. When you go back to 2A and B, subclause 2A and B, it's just the management and direction of the administration, so that the policy directions that are coming from the minister and coming from the board only refer to daily management and direction of the administration. Okay?
What does the word advising mean?
Advising? Where's that?
C and D.
It must be, I'm not sure I'm looking at the right clause. Which C and D are you using?
Advising the
down
Director
there.
General.
All right, subclause 2. I mean, it's just giving the Deputy Director General Enforcement the right to advise the director, but the director doesn't have to take it.
No, but you see, this is what Senator Duran is getting at, because when you read advising, it sort of suggests that he is advising the director and the Director General should follow the advice.
Well, I don't think it goes that far, that the Director General must follow his advice. I think it just gives him the ability to advise, but the Director General doesn't have to take his advice. And then the policy directions are to deal with administration and management. But go ahead, AJ.
So, Madam Chair, for the record, and I thank honourable senators for putting this is an important point. Advice is just what it is, advice. It's not an instruction and it's not a direction, so it is capable of being ignored. So the plain and ordinary interpretation, the literal interpretation of statutes is what bears here. And for the record, advice can be taken or not taken. It can be ignored. It's pretty much like consultation. I can consult with you. I may have an obligation to consult with you, but I don't have to do anything after that. We spoke.
I never do that.
In relation to 5C and D and your question,
That's the annual.
and you've asked the point about line of authority and to avoid confusion. So for the record, we are legislating the organogram here. You have a Director General, and as the name implies in a literal interpretation, you have a Deputy Director General Enforcement. If you look at C and D, it says, which shall be communicated to him through the Director General. So the line of authority is Minister may make certain things, General, goes to Director General, which then goes to Deputy Director General. Similarly, the flow back goes that way. When it comes to the enforcement provisions, the bill is clear. Only the Deputy Director General Enforcement can act, and to the exclusion of everyone else. So that is the only person clothed with the authority to do these things. So it's like having Petrotrin has estate constables. Petrotrin has a board of directors. The only person that could arrest you is an estate constable, unless you're using a private citizen's power of arrest. So that's an example of an enforcement function by an estate constable versus the general parameters of a board, etc. So the line of authority is clear. C and D both provide which shall be communicated to him through the Director General. I hope that assists.
Madam President, just to be clear, I'm going to ask the simple question. Could the Director General tell the Deputy Director General of Enforcement what to do, like how to manage his division? Or that is entirely dependent on the Deputy Director General and his mandate on how he wants to run his division?
So the person with locus, the person with the position in law to carry out enforcement is only the Deputy Director General and the public officers under him or her. To answer your question directly, the Director General can say to the enforcement position, I think you ought to do this, or I recommend, but only the enforcement officer can act. And if he chooses not to act, that's entirely up to him. If there's a complaint that goes on there, the complaint is made to the Public Services Commission, and the Public Services Commission engages the matter.
To be clear, the Director General cannot instruct the Deputy Director General in regards to A and B.
Correct. But that's what I mean, because you said, can he tell him? So I'm using your word, right? So he could tell him whatever he wants. I could tell you this guy is pink.
So, Senator Ryan, with respect to your proposed amendment at 14C.
I will withdraw it. 14C, I will withdraw. I believe
Yes.
14A and B was accepted.
Yes, thank you. So, Honourable Senators, the question is that Clause 14 be amended as circulated by Senator Ryan in respect of A and B. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. The ayes have it. Honourable Senators, the question is that Clause 14 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clause 14 as amended now stands part of the bill.
Clauses 15 to 29.
Honourable Senators, the question is that clauses 15 to 29 stand part of the bill. Senator Ryan.
Madam President, I indicated previously that I had some general questions on clauses 23, 24.
No, hold on.
Okay.
Let's do it just very quickly.
Okay.
Just raise the particular clause that you need
Okay.
an issue to be addressed.
Thank you, Madam President. So with clause 23, I had a general question in terms of part B, subsection B, 23(1)(b). And it says, with the approval of the minister, monies paid to the authority by ways of fees, fines, grants, rent, and all these different things. Now, my question is in the future or at any point in time or right now, why consideration was not given to like a two-tier system where you allow for a percentage of the revenues collected go into a particular fund that would probably perhaps could have come under B to act for the Revenue Authority to have funds accessible funds outside of the budget cycle, because it is a critical feature of creating a Revenue Authority to kind of create that independence from the whole budget cycle and being subjected to the Ministry of Finance didn't give releases and so on.
Minister of Finance.
Double-edged sword, because you may want to give the authority a percentage of revenue. When revenue is low, that percentage will be low. And it is exactly when revenue is low that you may want to give the Revenue Authority more money to improve revenue collection. So it has its pluses and it has its minuses. The other thing is that when you do it that way, you sometimes end up in a situation, and I've seen it with the, which is the one that collects the cess, the Regulated Industries Commission. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've seen it with the Regulated Industries Commission. Quite often they create a surplus. There's a formula by which the Regulated Industries Commission collects its revenue. And quite often they achieve a surplus and then they do all sorts of things with the surplus. There was a former chairman of that RIC who built up quite a surplus because he was getting a percentage of the revenue, or the percentage of the billings of these various utility companies, and started to buy land and wanted to put up a building and all sorts of things. And so you don't want that. You want parliamentary scrutiny of expenditure. You want the Parliament to be able to look at the parliamentary appropriation for this authority and the Parliament to approve it. You don't want an authority to be able to just get money and do whatever it wants with it without proper oversight. So it's not something I could support. Maybe later on, 5 years from now, when this thing is running and it's, everything looks good, then you could consider that they get a percentage. But I wouldn't recommend it now at all. AG?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I catch Senator Dionarine's excellent point. Autonomy. Autonomy removes the need for a request, for budgetary cycles. It breeds for independence, nice and flexible. I got the point. The current trending of governments around the world that have gone digital in particular is to sweep up accounts. Because you may not know this, but governments have to borrow when they don't have the money, quite simply put. Governments don't have money when billions of dollars are locked away in individual enterprises. So you might actually not be aware, as many of us aren't, that there are billions of dollars of assets in the Republic of any country, Trinidad and Tobago included, in bank accounts, locked investment positions. If you can consolidate those treasury issues into a consolidated fund, you borrow less. Your taxpayers pay less. The ability to have requests for money, have them approved, treasury performance factors, it really now goes down to the whole concept of where this country is going to go, whole of government accounting. So the more you actually look at how you manage money, like we do in the information technology world, it's called just-in-time delivery. No longer do people keep large warehouses of stock just in case. They go for just-in-time. It reduces your overhead. It manages your positions. It applies to money as well. So one of the things that I'm paying attention to in particular as we do the law on digitization, etc., and some of the things that we're talking about include this concept of autonomy and financial autonomy and ability to hold on to your own autonomy. Because by that method, I'd like to just end by saying this. In running a country, we're not running a company. So there are ministries like the Ministry of Social Development. Their sole job is to spend billions of dollars. They don't have to earn a cent. And then there are other ministries like the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of Energy that have to raise revenue. So the ability to transfer via and manage now becomes a whole of government issue. So for that reason, I'd just like to say I support the Minister of Finance's view that we look at this going forward, because it's not just this autonomy. We have judicial autonomy, parliamentary autonomy. There are lots of autonomies that we're looking at, but they're all underwritten by money.
Thank you, AG. I just asked about it because I see it as a potential or an opportunity to create a fund to allow the Revenue Authority to probably have access to monies that would be dedicated towards modernization or technological advancement, knowing very well that the authority would have to clean up a lot of systems and implement a whole bit of technological advancement solutions in the once this bill is passed. Thanks, Madam President.
Right. Can we move on to, you had a concern about clause 24, you said?
Yes. Right. With clause 24, now, I haven't raised this point about the whole debt issue. I mean, I know this is standard with all statutory authorities, but is there any avenue to consider putting a ceiling to this borrowing limit? And if no, why not? Why we don't put borrowing ceilings in laws such as these? Because the reality is that we do have a debt problem.
I think the minister has gotten it, Minister of Finance. This is clause 24.
Companies and state.
As the AG has said, that is in another law. You don't need to have it inside of here. Oh. Those statutory limits are in another law. You don't need to put them in here.
Okay. And then can we next query Senator Dinnerai?
28, one question. What is the role of the Office of the Procurement Regulator? Because that law is partially proclaimed. So how would this be affected when, what is the role of the Office of the Procurement Regulator in this?
I would think it would be covered by that.
So in the Public Procurement Act, when it becomes operational, the Public Procurement Act says wherever you see Central Tenders Board, repeal and replace and put public procurement. So that's already taken care of there.
Yeah, that's it. So, honorable senators, the question is that clauses 15 to 29 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 15 to 29 now stand part of the bill.
Clause 30.
The question is that clause 30 stand part of the bill. Senator Dinnerai.
Thank you, Madam President. I believe I would withdraw this one primarily because I am seeing that it includes an operational plan, and an operational plan will include the budget as well. So I withdraw this one.
So, honorable senators, the question is that clause 30 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clause 30 now stands part of the bill.
Clauses 31 to 42.
The question is that clauses 31 to 42 stand part of the bill. Senator Dinnerai, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam President. With respect to clause 33, I had a question with respect to subsection 3. My question here is that the secrecy provisions of Section 4 of the Income Tax Act, would it apply here? Because that is a big problem that we have right now. Every time institutions, public sector entities come before any committees, they can't access information. So I just wanted to make sure that the Auditor General will be able to access this information to conduct audits in the manner in which that they should.
What the General can do is audit information that is not of a personal and private nature. So they will audit the expenditure of the authority, its procurement and matters like that, but they can't audit tax returns. Auditor General can't do that.
So, question then, through you, Madam President. What happens in an instance in a situation where they audit all of they conduct an audit, they find a particular problem in a particular area and request a batch of they wouldn't be able
They
to.
can't get into personal and private information.
The Auditor General's function is to audit the books of an entity which is a public entity. They cannot and ought not, in principle, to step into the private affairs of citizens. So the only ouster that the Auditor General has received so far is in relation to anything that's on the private side, an individual side, because that secrecy provision is, if you think about it, the one area, knock on wood, so far that you haven't had breaches from for years is really the inland revenue on the personal income tax side. So the accounts of the entity itself are fully open to the Auditor General, but they cannot step behind the iron curtain which protects the individual tax-paying information.
Does the question,
Mr. West.
Minister?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I just wanted to add for Senator Dion's comfort, there is contemplated in the design of the TTRA an internal audit unit as well as a fraud investigation unit which should be able to address the issues that concern you.
Honourable Senators, the question is that clauses 31 to 42 now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clauses 31 to 42 now stand part of the bill.
New clause 36.
The question is that new clause 36 be read a second time. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. New clause 36 will now be read a second time.
New clause 36.
Senator Dionne.
Thank you, Madam President. I thought that this should be, even though the law provides, have a lot of accountability mechanisms built into it, and even though it has a strategic plan that I believe is done every 3 years, I still think that it should be put into the law that we have a mandatory parliamentary review on the performance of the Revenue Authority after 5 years, not necessarily 5 years, but after a stipulated period of time.
I think I understand what you're driving at here. The account of the Revenue Authority would be sent to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, which is chaired by Senator Mark for the time being, and maybe for the next 20 years, because it's chaired by a member of the opposition. But I'm not sure, so that there's a constant review of the authority by the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. I think what you're driving at is the act itself.
Yeah.
You know, so what I would suggest is that the minister review the act and submit a report to Parliament every 5 years.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes, that will work.
So
Yeah.
we could use those words.
Yeah,
That
because through you, Madam President, the idea is to really see how the model has been working, and we also have the TADAT report against which we have established a baseline, and we could see how the Revenue Authority has been improving in terms of the level of efficiency of tax administration.
So I'll give you a form of words. The act shall be subject to review by the minister, who shall submit a report to the Parliament every 5 years.
Slow it down so I can take it, please. Thank you.
The act, the provisions of the act shall be subject to a review by the minister, who shall submit a report to Parliament every 5 years. And then Senator Mark can have fun with that. if he's still around in 5 years.
So I'll just reread it for you. The provisions of the Act shall be subject to review by the Minister, who shall submit a report to Parliament every 5 years.
Just one question, Madam President. Would that be laid in the Parliament?
Yeah, well, I have to submit it to the Parliament.
So it's no negative or affirmative?
No,
No, it's
representation
laid
on-
and then it goes to the Public Accounts Enterprises
Okay.
Committee.
All right,
That's
good.
it. Once you lay something, if it's from a statutory authority, it automatically is referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee.
Okay.
Put it as a 43 as opposed to 36.
No, you don't have to be at 36. It could
Yeah.
be or something like that.
Madam Chair, I was just suggesting, instead of renumbering all the clauses and to avoid cross-referencing and proofing, if the honourable member would consider it being read as new clause 43 as opposed to 36.
Sure.
Okay. Right.
She has to put 43 to stand part of the bill still.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at my procedure.
Yeah, I know.
Senator
You
Ryan,
said that.
may I ask you then, in light of the rewriting of the new clause and the fact that we are now going to put it in a different part of the bill, if you would be minded to just withdraw your new clause 36, and then
Sure.
I'll put the other clause. Yeah?
Sure.
So just for the record, new clause 36, as proposed by Senator Ryan, has been withdrawn.
New clause 43.
The question is that new clause 43 be read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. New clause 43 will now be read a second time.
New clause 43.
Read it out. So, Honourable Senators, the question is that new clause 43, which reads as follows: the provisions of the Act shall be subject. The provisions of this Act shall be subject to review by the Minister, who shall submit a report to Parliament every 5 years. So the question is that new clause 43 be added to the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. New clause 43 now stands part of the bill.
The schedule.
The question is that the schedule now stand part of the bill. The question is that the schedule, those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The schedule now stands part of the bill. Honourable Senators, the question is that the bill as amended be now reported to the Senate. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The bill as amended will now be reported to the Senate. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam President. I wish to report that the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2021 was considered in Committee of the Whole and approved with amendments. I now beg to move that the Senate agree with the committee's report.
Honourable Senators, the question is that this Senate agree with the committee's report on the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2021. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I remind members that 3 minutes will be allowed so that all members can return to the chamber. So we will now begin the division.
Mr. Rambrat? Yes. Ms. Gopiskun? Yes. Mr. Senalan? Yes. Mr. Hussain? Yes. Ms. West? Yes. Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. De Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Singh? Yes. Mrs. Sagram Singh Suklal?
Yes.
Mr. Bacchus?
Yes.
Mrs. Lazamal Lee Singh?
Yes.
Ms. Bethelny? Dr. Ibrahim? Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Mark? No. Ms. John?
No.
Ms. Lachmidial?
No.
Mr. Naked?
No.
Mr. Leiter?
No.
Mr. Roberts?
No.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Vera,
Yes.
Dr. Dial Singh,
Yes.
Ms. Dionarain,
Yes.
Ms. Sipasad,
Yes.
Mr. Timal,
No.
Mrs. Thompson, aye.
Aye.
Dr. Dylan Remy, Mr. Welch,
Abstain.
Madam President, the result of the division is as follows. 21 senators voted in favor for, 7 senators voted against, there was 1 abstention.
Honourable Senators, on a vote to agree with the committee's report, 21 senators voted yes, 7 senators voted no, and 1 senator abstained. Minister of Finance.
Madam President, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Establish the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority and for related matters be now read a third time and passed.
Honourable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Establish the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority and for related matters be now read a third time and passed. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Well, there's no need for the 3-minute interruption because all members are here.
Mr. Rambrad? Yes. Mrs. Gopiskun?
Yes.
Mr. Senanan? Mr. Hussain? Ms. West?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. De Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Singh?
Yes.
Mrs. Sagram Singh Sukla?
Yes.
Mr. Bacchus?
Yes.
Mrs. Lazama Lee Singh?
Yes.
Ms. Bethelmy?
Yes.
Dr. Ibrahim?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Mark?
No.
Ms. John?
No.
Ms. Lachmidial?
No.
Mr. Naked?
No.
Mr. Lyda?
No.
Mr. Roberts?
No.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Vera?
Yes.
Dr. Dial Singh?
Yes.
Ms. Dionarain?
Yes.
Ms. Sipasad?
Yes.
Mr. Timal?
No.
Mrs. Thompson, aye.
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Abstain.
Madam President, the result of the division is as follows. 21 senators voted in favor for, 7 senators voted against, there was 1 abstention.
Honourable Senators, the result of the division is as follows. 21 senators voted yes, 7 senators voted no, and 1 senator abstained. The bill has therefore been passed.
a bill entitled An Act to Establish the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority and for related matters.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move that this Senate do now adjourn to a date to be fixed. Thank you.
Honourable Senators, before I put the question on the adjournment, leave has been granted for 2 matters to be raised. Senator Vera.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me declare from the outset that I am not promoting ivermectin in lieu of or as a substitute for vaccination. I am not an anti-vaxxer. I accept that the most effective way of combating COVID is through vaccination. We must vaccinate as many people as possible, as fast as possible. And every sector of the society must be engaged in this effort. But I am concerned. I'm concerned that we may be disregarding a readily available, affordable, and effective treatment for COVID. And that a drug which can save lives and mitigate the negative consequences of long COVID is being ignored. When ivermectin was discovered in the 1970s, it was hailed as a wonder drug. One of 3 wonder drugs which has had the greatest beneficial impact on the health and well-being of mankind. The other 2 being aspirin and penicillin. Ivermectin proved ideal in combating some of the world's most devastating and disfiguring diseases: river blindness, elephantitis, malaria, and as a therapy against parasitic infections, all without side effects. So much so that the discoverers of the drug were awarded a Nobel Prize for medicine. It is therefore ironic to hear people mama-guying the drug as fit only for horses, cattle, and dogs. Yes, it's true. Ivermectin has had huge success in animal health. But that does not and should not take away from the fact that it has also been used successfully to overcome many human diseases, and new uses for it are continually being found. Now, I appreciate ivermectin has not yet gotten the WHO's imprimatur as a treatment for COVID, and no doubt that accounts for some hesitancy. But the drug has been around for over 40 years and has been used extensively. It is cheap, widely available, and generally recognized as one of the safest drugs in history. A comprehensive review dated 3rd of March 2021, conducted by Dr. Jacques Descotes, Professor Emeritus at the University of Lyon, concludes that hundreds of millions of human subjects have been treated with ivermectin for curative or prophylactic purposes over the last 3 decades. And there is a large body of data available which allows for a detailed analysis of the drug's medical safety, and that ivermectin is among the safest and well-tolerated drugs on the market, end of quote. I have spoken with doctors here and in other Caribbean islands, all of whom speak in glowing terms about ivermectin's effectiveness in treating COVID. Indeed, there is an ocean of data to the effect that ivermectin's safe, broad-spectrum functionality inhibits attachment of COVID's viral spike to the human cell membrane and effectively blocks infection. There is evidence that ivermectin has been successfully used to treat COVID in India, Africa, Australia, South America, and other countries. Begging the question as to why is information being distorted suppressed, and dismissed. How is this possible when ivermectin is on the WHO's list of essential medicines? I don't want to speculate. I don't want to believe that crass commercial considerations on the part of Big Pharma, who have an interest in selling high-priced vaccines, might be informing resistance to the use of ivermectin for COVID patients. And I don't want to believe that our health officials blindly follow WHO recommendations unreservedly and without question, because that would be a fettering of discretion and a dereliction of the duty to exercise independent judgment. All I am asking for is for the medical profession and our health authorities to critically and objectively assess the drug's potential and to do so with urgency and humility. In an Israeli study, Professor Eli Schwartz confirms that ivermectin breaks down the transmission chain and can change the course of the disease. He tells skeptics that it will not harm you and may help you. Ivermectin is being investigated in the United Kingdom as part of the platform randomized trial of possible COVID-19 treatments for recovery at home and in other non-hospital settings. Oxford professor Chris Butler, one of the chief investigators, he confirms that ivermectin is readily available globally, has been in wide use for many other infectious conditions, is a well-known medicine with a good safety profile, and is already being used to treat COVID in several countries. In Jamaica, in an open letter this May, a group of doctors called on the Minister of Health for the use of ivermectin in that country's fight against COVID. And they wrote, and I quote, "In their carefully considered opinion, the available data on ivermectin is quite adequate, and there is no need to await the outcome of further trials," end of quote. There is evidence from Japanese researchers that in certain African countries where river blindness is endemic and ivermectin is distributed to the population to cure infection, there is practically no COVID in those countries. Also noteworthy is that in malaria-infested countries, where the population has traditionally taken ivermectin to ward off infection, COVID cases are rare. Ivermectin is seen as a COVID preventative and a cure. Ivermectin is also credited for obliterating 97% of cases in the provinces of Delhi, Uttar Pradesh, and Goa. This after the WHO cautioned India that they were making a mistake by using ivermectin, that the drug could be dangerous, and there was no evidence it worked. Delhi decided to use the drug nonetheless, and their death rate fell dramatically. But on the other hand, the state of Tamil Nadu, which opted not to use ivermectin, they were devastated by COVID. Interestingly, the Indian Bar Association has served legal notice on WHO's chief scientist, asking the organization to justify its recommendation not to use ivermectin. The association also issued a press notice questioning whether the WHO's directives against ivermectin were biased, irregular, and flawed. And they rebuked the organization's attempt to deprive people of knowledge about ivermectin's effectiveness as really unfortunate. Now, I'm not against the WHO. I commend the organization for what it's done, but they're not infallible. Let's not forget the mistakes and the gaffes they made at the outbreak of the pandemic. They took weeks before they declared COVID an international matter. My concern is when patients are facing life-threatening or life-limiting conditions, when patients cannot get into the parallel healthcare system, when there may be insufficient beds, when ventilators and oxygen is not available, whether there isn't an ethical duty to consider, even if, just as a therapeutic measure of last resort, the use of what may be considered a safe, low-cost, readily available treatment option. Wouldn't it be shameful, a travesty, a great injustice, if it turns out that people have died unnecessarily, when lives could have been saved if they had used ivermectin, but we dropped the ball on them and on their loved ones? If ivermectin can save lives, mitigate against long COVID, and help reopen the economy, shouldn't we, at the very least, be considering its use as a possibility? I'm not talking about ivermectin sold in pet stores for animals, but ivermectin for humans, used under medical supervision and with informed consent. I thank you.
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I thank Senator Vieira for raising this very topical issue. There were some interesting positions put where the goodly senator said ivermectin does not have side effects. Madam President, all drugs have side effects. We have to be careful, Senator, how we speak. Ivermectin has side effects. I implore you not to make these types of statements. All drugs, aspirin, all drugs have side effects. Madam President, ivermectin is an antiparasitic. Its major use is in ungulates, that is hoofed animals, and there is some limited use in humans. In the in vitro setting, that is in the lab setting, the study shows that ivermectin may warrant further investigation. Many drugs in a laboratory setting show promise. Drugs for HIV, drugs for dementia show promise in vitro, in a lab. But the in vivo setting is a bit different. Many drugs then fail. And what the goodly senator is not considering is that who is going to bear the brunt of the liability issues if the government, against science, uses ivermectin and people die or have side effects. It is easy for somebody outside of government to make recommendations. But when you are in government and you have the responsibility, you have to do what we call follow the science. That is, you put the science in front and you be guided by it. Recommendations from the International Guideline Development Groups, GDC, a group containing experts, clinicians, patients, ethicists, and methodologists regarding COVID-19 patients, has not recommended ivermectin for treatment and prevention. The following population intervention comparator outcome, PICO, refers to this. 1, effect of ivermectin on mortality. The effect of ivermectin on mortality is uncertain. 2, mechanical ventilation. The effect of ivermectin on mechanical ventilation is uncertain. 3, virus clearance after 7 days. Ivermectin may increase or have no effect on viral clearance. Hospital admission for outpatients. The effect of ivermectin on hospital admission is uncertain. A government cannot formulate policy based on uncertainty. Severe adverse events. And this is why I caution the senator when he says ivermectin has no side effects. Ivermectin may increase the risk of serious adverse events leading to drug discontinuation. Time to clinical improvement. Ivermectin may have little or no difference on time to clinical improvement. Duration of hospitalization. The effect of ivermectin on hospital length of stay is uncertain. Note these words, uncertain. Time to viral clearance. We are uncertain whether ivermectin improves or worsens time to viral clearance. Madam President, at this point in time, Trinidad and Tobago's position as a responsible government, following the science, following evidence from around the world, clearly says that the drugs recommended by WHO for the treatment of COVID-19 at this time include IL-6 receptor blocker and systemic corticosteroids. The drugs not recommended are 1, ivermectin, except in the context of clinical trials. And I was surprised to hear the senator said, and I'm here, no need to await the outcome of further trials. What if we had done that with vaccines? You have to go through all phases of clinical trials before you let a drug loose on a population. That is the science, and that is how you avoid litigation. That is how you avoid deaths and severe outcomes. So the drugs not recommended, ivermectin, except in the context of clinical trials. 2, hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine. If you would recall, there was a time when we said hydroxychloroquine was your wonder drug and that we should use it. We didn't, and the world was proven right. Remdesivir. All these drugs are not recommended at this time. So I urge the country to follow the science, because the liability issues are not to be trivialized. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Deputy President, today we had 8 deaths. We could prevent those 8 deaths not by being caught up on whether ivermectin should be used, but by encouraging vaccinations. Encouraging vaccinations. There is no need for people to be dying of COVID-19 in these numbers, because since May, when we started a very robust mass vaccination program, it is shown locally and internationally that a vaccinated individual has a 99% chance of not developing severe COVID, not getting into an ICU or HDU setting, and not dying. That is the conversation that all of us should be having now. To pollute the conversation with ivermectin, I think most respectfully, is doing a disservice to the population at this time. Neither WHO, nor CARPHA, nor the FDA, and CARPHA does not carry the bag for Big Pharma. CARPHA is a Caribbean institute that reports to the CARICOM heads of government. They are not on the payroll of Big Pharma. Neither WHO, nor CARPHA, nor the FDA, nor the European Medicines Agency, no responsible, stringent authority recognizes the use of ivermectin at this time. And we are always careful to say at this time, because things could change. But at this time, following the science, putting the science in front, let the science lead, is the way we are going at this particular point in time. The day that human trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, shows that ivermectin is in fact the drug to use, then we will follow the science and use it. But for now, at this point in time, today at 5:45 p.m., ivermectin has not been recognized by any stringent regulatory body anywhere in the world and by CARPHA. And on those grounds, the government of Trinidad and Tobago is steadfast in following the science, and we urge everyone to simply get vaccinated. I thank you, sir.
Senator Mark? You have a pen?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I raised today a motion a matter on a motion for the adjournment to deal with the need for the government to explain the legal basis for its decision to appoint a two-member committee comprising private citizens to investigate allegations of misconduct against senior members of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Mr. Vice President, sometime in December, I understand, of 2020, unknowing to the population, our so-called transparent government, led by the Prime Minister, secretly, stealthily, surreptitiously established a two-person committee of private citizens to conduct investigations into allegations of misconduct as it relates to the issuance of firearm user licenses in our country. The question that has to be asked, Mr. Vice President, is it ignorance? Is it incompetence? Or is it sheer deliberate and malicious action by the government aimed at systematically and calculatedly working towards the destruction of our democratic institutions? We also have to ask the question, is there a plot hatched at Balize House to remove the Commissioner of Police of this country?
So, Senator Mark, again, as much of this is a matter in the adjournment, you have to be very careful about the line that you're going down, especially when it comes to the imputation of improper motives. So just be extremely careful. The line that you're going down right now would be in breach of that particular standing order.
Mr. Vice President, may I continue, please? It is not only the office of the Commissioner of Police that is at stake because of this secret, private investigation launched by the Prime Minister, but it is the very TTPS, Mr. Vice President. Isn't the Prime Minister rather aware of his legal limitations? He is not a dictator. He is not an authoritarian. He is not a totalitarian. He doesn't have all the power. He is governed by the law. We have a democracy. It is subject to the rule of law. So the question that has to be asked, and I was amazed as this plot thickens and unfolds, that we learned today that the Minister of National Security instructed the Commissioner of Police not to come to work. Who is the Minister of National Security in this country to tell the Commissioner of Police not to report for duty, continue your leave? If that is what the Minister of National Security told the Commissioner of Police today, Mr. Vice President, I call on the Minister of National Security to tender his resignation. That is a function of only the Police Service Commission in this country. No minister can tell the Commissioner of Police not to report for duty. Only the appointment, the person or the institution that appointed that person. That is reckless. That is irresponsible. And that is an overreach on the part of the executive arm of the state, Mr. Vice President. And we in the United National Congress will not stand idly by and allow the PNM government to overreach and destroy and undermine institutions in our country. We will not permit that. So, Mr. Vice President, I have brought this motion today in the interest of our democracy I have brought this motion today so that the Prime Minister or his lackeys, well, you wouldn't say lackeys, but his ministers rather, the Prime Minister to come here. I didn't want the Minister of National Security to come here. I wanted the Prime Minister to be present here today to explain to this country, through you, Mr. Vice President, where did he derive his power from when he appointed 2 private citizens to investigate allegations of misconduct and the sale of firearms within the police service? Where did he get his power from? Mr. Vice President, this is dangerous, what is taking place in our country. You bring two individuals. One is a rear admiral. He can only talk about, he's a rear admiral, Pritchard, and another one called Barrington from the special branch. And then we are told by the Prime Minister in the Parliament that they did it for free. Mr. Vice President, we senior counsel Israel Khan had a letter in the Express, and he made it very clear in that letter, Mr. Vice President, that the government, the Prime Minister, has no authority to appoint any private individuals to investigate the conduct or even the misuse of firearms in the police service or to investigate any police officer. He does not have that authority. So how could you invite people, private citizens, to investigate the police? Mr. Vice President, if you don't know, let me inform you. There are only 2 institutions in this country that can investigate the police. In fact, the Commissioner of Police is in complete charge under the Constitution of the police service. No Prime Minister could tell the Commissioner of Police, or the Prime Minister can just go over the head of the Commissioner of Police. So, Mr. Vice President, we want to know, we would like to know, let the government explain to this Parliament where the government got this legal authority to appoint 2 private citizens. I am of the firm view, and based on the research that we have done, there are 2 bodies, as far as I'm aware, that can investigate the conduct of the police. It is the Police Complaints Authority. It is something called the Professional Standards Bureau within the police service. They have that Professional Standard Bureau within the police service. They can conduct an investigation. But no Prime Minister, because he's the chairman of the National Security Council, can arrogate unto himself, Mr. Vice President, that kind of power. So therefore, what the country is saying right now, I'm glad that the minister is here too. So he must tell the country today whether what Gary Griffith said in today's Newsday, it is in tomorrow's Newsday, but it is printed today, that Minister Hines ordered him not to resume duties come Monday the 21st of September. I would like the minister to put on record today whether he told the Commissioner of Police that, and where he got the power to tell the Commissioner of Police that. So, Mr. Vice President, the government of this country is treading dangerous grounds. We are at a very dangerous point in this country for a government to be acting in the way that they are acting. And Mr. Vice President, in closing, there is a clear plot. It is being unfolded before your eyes every day by the PNM government to find an excuse to discredit, to delegitimize, and to ultimately fire the current Commissioner of Police. He must deny that on behalf of his government, that that is not their intention. And they have also, and this is my final point. All right, thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Minister of Security.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Senator Wade Mark must be a seer man. I don't know how he can ascribe all those things to this government about what this government's intention is, We have no communication other than in this parliament with Senator Mark, and he's not privy to the government's planning or decisions in any form, Mr. Vice President. As usual, he appeared to have missed the mark by a mile today as he waded around in his simplicity and scandal-mongering. Let me address very briefly the question he raised about some article in the Newsday today, and to make it clear that this government is not about any bacchanal and scandal and small talk. We are about providing the people of Trinidad and Tobago with good government, honest government, assuring them that their country is in safe and secure hands with the PNM. That's what we are about. With that behind me, let me say that the Commissioner of Police, Acting Commissioner of Police, Mr. Gary Griffith, wrote a letter to me suggesting that he returned to work approximately 1 week or sometime before he was due to return from a period of leave. That leave was applied for. He applied to me as Minister of National Security in the normal course of things, and the Police Service Commission was informed. The leave was approved. He returned here approximately 1 week before it was due to expire and inquired of me the following day whether he should return to his desk. I told him I should revert because I needed to understand the implications of that for his approved leave. Before I can return to him, I became aware that he wrote similarly to the Police Service Commission, and the Police Service Commission responded to him, suggesting in the main that that is a matter for the Minister of National Security. And it is on the basis of those two bits of correspondence, which having called the commissioner, he acknowledged dispatching to the Service Commission and acknowledged the reply that I was aware that he had received. It was on the basis of that that I told him that he should remain on leave up until the expiration of same on the 20th of September. Mr. Vice President, it so happened, not with any premeditation, that the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of National Security was present with me at the time, and my phone, as usually is the case, was on loudspeaker. So the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of National Security overheard everything in the conversation, and I want to report to Senator Mark and the country today in the spirit of truth and honesty that I told the commissioner and repeated myself twice, making it pellucidly, abundantly, sufficiently clear for any child to understand. I am speaking about you staying at bay until the expiration of your leave. He acknowledged that and went off of the phone. So to suggest, as Senator Mark did, that this minister told him that he should not return to his desk beyond the 20th is clearly missing the mark, as he always does in his scandalous, and if you would permit me, a colloquialism, bacchanalish tone, which we reject in the face of the seriousness of the governance of the affairs of Trinidad and Tobago, and more specifically, the affairs of the Ministry of National Security. Let me come to the content of his motion today, because he waded around wildly with the matter that I have just addressed. Mr. President, Vice President, the National Security Council gets its legal authority in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, Section 75, recognizes and establishes cabinet government. And the National Security Council is a subcommittee of the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago. It became aware of public disquiet from elements of the media, members of the public, people who report directly to us, of some concerns about the mismanagement of the licensing regime inside of the police service as it relates to the issue of firearms and other matters pertinent to the firearms regime and industry. The information was disquieting and was growing louder. The National Security Council couldn't ignore that, but not knowing the facts, asked two recently retired national security platform experienced patriotic operators in the person of Rear Admiral Pritchard, retired, who was the Chief of Defense Staff, and Senior Superintendent who acted as Assistant Commissioner Arthur Barrington, who headed the Special Branch, as public-spirited people to conduct a fact-finding exercise so as to permit the National Security Council to determine whether the public disquiet that we could not ignore was a real concern. And both men, patriotic, industrious, knowledgeable, experienced as they are, undertook to do that using their time, their professionalism, and their love for Trinidad and Tobago, without a call for any fee. None was offered to them, and not 1 cent was paid to those two public-spirited, experienced former national security operators. And they went into the field, they interviewed who they had to interview, they spoke to persons on this fact-finding exercise purely to advise the National Security Council as to whether these were really matters for concern. Something the cabinet does all of the time. We have agencies, we have people, we have companies coming to us to give advice to the cabinet so as to assist us in making sound, good government decisions. Nothing new. And that was done. They produced a report not calling a single name, identifying issues in the system, its strengths, its weaknesses, its potential for exploitation and criminality, and some other issues, not a name called, and with some strong and serious recommendations, which too could not be ignored, given the height from which they came. And Mr. President, I'm sorry, to suggest that we had two private citizens who were investigating senior police officers is as wrong as an O. And it is as foolish as you can have it. But I excuse Senator Mark, he doesn't know better. And he cannot help himself, because that is the ethos of the UNC. It is simply wrong and scandalous. That was not their mandate. Theirs was a fact-finding exercise which was very useful to the National Security Council and by extension the cabinet. And if in future any matters of criminality become relevant, it is the police service that will investigate and treat with those matters in the way that only they are mandated to. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Honourable Senators, before I put the question, I now invite Senators to bring brief greetings on the occasion of Republic Day to be observed on Friday, September the 24th, 2021. Senator Young.
Mr. President, I take this opportunity on behalf of the government bench to bring greetings on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago on this occasion of the Republic Day, or the celebration of our republicanism, on the 24th of September, 2021. It is clear that now, in retrospect, although in those days when we set out to become a republic, when our leader at the time, Dr. Eric Williams, set out to make us a republic, there were many arguments to and fro as to whether we would be in a better or worse place if we were to govern and answer to ourselves. It is clear that that decision was a good one. And I stand here to raise a toast against him and all of those who stood on that day to decide that we will become a republic. There are many nations who are now following suit in this day. Even our neighbors are seeking to become a republic this year, as we celebrate 45 years of our republicanism. On the 1st of August, 1973, we became a republic nation, which simply meant that we removed the Governor General as our titular head, and we would have become a Republican Parliament. The first sitting of that Parliament would have been on the 24th of September in that year. What was significant about that is that on that day, the then Governor General became our first president, and from that day, we've had presidents that all were born and bred in Trinidad and Tobago. It simply means that every decision that was made, every law that had to be assented to, has been done so from that day to this day, the 12th Republican Parliament, by a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. And while in this time, for many of our children and many of the people who are looking on, it seems to be something that is frivolous, in the time of colonialism and world rule and domination, it was not even fathomable then. But today I stand as a proud product, and I thank my ancestors, I thank God Almighty for giving us this opportunity. And as we look, even in this sitting today, and the passing of this legislation, we are given an opportunity to refine our laws that will be assented to right here in Trinidad. We can make a decision as to how we rule, how we move, and whether we are for or against, we are playing a part and making a difference in our own island. And for that, I think it is worth us taking the time out to recognize and thanking all senators, all of the participants, upper and lower house, that participate in this August House, that we are privileged to stand here, and we give God thanks for the opportunity.
Senator Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, on behalf of the United National Congress, on behalf of our distinguished leader of the opposition, former Prime Minister, the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, and on behalf of my colleagues on the opposition bench, we would like on this occasion to bring greetings to the people of our Republic of Trinidad and Tobago as we collectively prepare to celebrate our 45th anniversary celebration of the founding of our Republic, which was sometime on September the 24th, 1976. Mr. Vice President, you know, vigilance is very crucial if you want to sustain and promote and defend freedom. Freedom is the foundation of all human rights. And therefore, it is important as we celebrate or prepare to celebrate our Republican status sometime next week, it is very important that we pay attention to protecting, safeguarding, and promoting our democracy. We have to also defend the rule of law, and we also have to protect the freedoms and liberties and rights of our citizens. Mr. Vice President, on the occasion of this Republican anniversary in 2021, Trinidad and Tobago finds itself literally on trial as it relates to our democratic institutions, our norms, and our values. They are coming and have come under merciless assault and continuous attack. Whether it is our trade unions, whether it is the police service, whether it is the Police Service Commission, whether it's the Teaching Service Commission, the judiciary, our parliament, the university, all the major democratic institutions in our nation continue to be under assault and attack by this present administration. So what we would like to do at this time is to call on the people of our nation to be extremely vigilant, be very watchful, and we have to do what is vitally important and absolutely necessary to ensure that our Republican status, which we were able to accomplish on the 24th of September 1976, and today we are celebrating, or we are about to celebrate, another year of Republican status, that we would like the people of Trinidad and Tobago to continue to be vigilant, to continue to uphold freedom, to continue to agitate for the upholding of the rule of law, and to protect our fledgling democracy, which under this particular administration has assumed great fragility. So, Mr. Vice President, I know you didn't want me to be too long. I do not want to take up much more time, but just to say on this occasion, as we celebrate Republican status, we'd like to extend to you and your family Happy Republic Day. We extend to the people of our great nation Happy Republic Day. We want them to be safe. We want them to be happy. We want them to be prosperous. And we want to make sure at the end of the day, we live in a democratic, free society where every creed and race must find an equal place. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for recognizing me and allowing me the honor to bring Republic greetings on behalf of the members of the independent bench. On August 1st, 1976, our new constitution was promulgated and the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago was born. We'd been independent since 1962. But in 1976, we truly took the reins of our future and our destiny in our hands. What does that mean? Or what did that mean? And what does it continue to mean? It means we are responsible for our future. It means we, in most cases, can't look to the jolly old colonial masters for the answers and solutions to our challenges. In most cases, we've done that. But one has to ask ourselves if on the almost eve of our 60th anniversary of independence, and then this on the eve when we celebrate on the 24th of September, we truly are in control of our own destiny when we still are looking to the Privy Council as our final appellate court. These are issues that we really have to consider as we move forward and ask ourselves, are we truly fully in charge of our own destiny? We also have to ask ourselves, Mr. Vice President, what do we want to leave for generations to come? We've accomplished much as a young nation, many huge feats. We've led the way in terms of republicanism in the Caribbean. As my colleague said earlier on, there are many other Caribbean and CARICOM states now looking to become republics themselves. And we have accomplished much, but we still have significant challenges ahead of us in this country. To me, the biggest or one of the most challenging issues we face in this country as a republic is disunity. And it threatens to tear us apart as opposed to pushing us forward and forging a future for this country. We are a diverse country, and it is to our credit that we've been able to forge a nation through that. But from what I'm seeing in recent times, it is cause for pause and great concern if we cannot put away or put aside our differences, even on critical issues, and come together in the interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago and in the interest of future generations. To me, that is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, challenge facing Trinidad and Tobago, particularly in a pandemic as we are facing now, when we can't even seem to put aside the differences and come to consensus on issues that are existential in nature, our very existence, the very lives of our citizens at stake. We really have to find a way to grapple with these issues and form consensus in the interest of our national motto. We say it proudly, together we aspire, together we achieve. But do we live it in the very fiber of our beings? And I think as we celebrate, or we seek to celebrate and look to celebrate Republic Day 2021, particularly in the midst of this pandemic, we, every citizen, in particular every adult citizen, has to ask ourselves if we are doing all we can do as a nation, in nation building, in the interest of Trinidad and Tobago as a country, as a nation, and not fragmented groups tearing away at each other. So on behalf of the members of the independent bench, as I said before, though we have much to celebrate as a country and much to be proud about, we have much to consider and contemplate into the future. And I hope we can do that on a united front. On behalf of the members of the independent bench, it gives me great pleasure and honor to wish Trinidad and Tobago a happy Republic Day 2021. Thank you.
Honourable Senators, I too wish to join you in bringing greetings on the occasion of our Republic Day. 45 years ago, on August 1st, 1976, Trinidad and Tobago embarked on another defining phase in its democratic evolution and became a republic. The holiday is commemorated on September the 24th, since it was on that date that the first parliament was convened under the new Republican Constitution. The attainment of Republican status not only represents the relinquishing of monarchical ties, but also should evoke a collective sense of pride, perseverance, and determination as a people. As members of Parliament, we have been called upon to perform an essential role in continuing to advance and uphold the principles and practices of our democratic system of government. So, as we celebrate Republic Day, let us reflect on the progress we have made as a young Republican nation and never take for granted the contributions we all must make to the peace and well-being of our democracy. I would like to wish you all, and by extension the citizenry of this country, happy Republic Day. Honourable Senators, the question is that this Senate now stands adjourned to a date to be fixed. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This Senate now stands adjourned to a date to be fixed. You want to go home?